Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Usman Paracha, and today we are going through our lecture 4 for the subject Applied Quantitative Analysis and Practices. Now, previously we have been discussing about the contingency tables. What were the practical implications of contingency table? Because it seems that maybe just displaying a summary table or contingency table maybe just for displaying ordinary information, but sometimes, or in most of the issues also, these contingency tables give us some very vital information about the business research issue or the business problem we are tackling with. Likewise, that's why it was important to display a practical implication of its importance. Now, we discussed about the ordered array and how numbers are displayed in the form of an array and they are ordered, and then how they are displayed. Likewise, then we moved ahead with frequency distribution, which is a very important aspect of business administration and display of results. So in this case, we display how the results are presented. It is one of the most effective way of displaying any kind of analysis and is most commonly used. Histogram is a bit advanced form of frequency distribution. Again, it's a preferred form which is frequently used in displaying all type of business analysis. Then we discussed bar chart and pie chart, one of the very common forms of displaying the data in the form of graphs in order to compare the various values. Then we moved ahead with the stem and leaf display and polygon chart. Normally, we did discuss about how they are used, but they are not that much effectively used in displaying the data in business applications as compared to frequency distribution and histogram. So frequency distribution and histogram importance is much more as compared to stem and leaf display and polygon chart. In case of polygon chart, however, when you are comparing two different entities, then surely it can give us a little bit of more effective review. Other than that, the frequency distribution and histogram are again preferred in this case. So the next we discussed about was scatter plotting and time series plotting. So scatter plotting, as we discussed before, it is normally done in order to find out the intensity of relationship between any two kind of variables or any two kind of entities. However, it gives us a very brief overview of whether any kind of relationship exists or not. The exact intensity of that relationship will not be cleared from this scatter plotting. So it is basically used to get an initial idea of how the relationship between any two variables under consideration look like. So likewise, time series plotting deals with data tracking over a certain period of time. It's very much effectively used in financial data, where data is spread over a certain stretch of time, like stock market prices, stock shares, or certain months or certain period of time, and it is very much used there. Likewise, both scatter plotting and time series plotting are more commonly used to analyze the results. So they are preferred again, like frequency distribution and histogram, in displaying and showing the nature of data available to us. Then we discussed about the guidelines which obscure the data, which are not very much effective, and they play a role in data hindrance, I would say. So we discussed about how to avoid such issues, like we should avoid the chart junks, we should avoid the display of data which is missing, and other issues which we have discussed. So continuing with the guidelines, there are certain issues which should be discussed, like chart junk term, which we used in previous slides. And in this case, you see, you can very much see that what's the interpretation of a bad presentation of data and what's the interpretation of a good presentation of data. It's easy to present the figures and just give a table of figures, but then it's more helpful to present it in the form of a graph, as you can see on the screen. And a graph gives us a very good comparison of where the values are lying, how they can be presented, and that gives a very good illustration of what you're trying to say to the audience. Then again, there should be like a relative basis in this case. You can see here that we have just in the left hand side, we just showed the frequency of A grades received by students, but we just displayed the original scale on the y-axis. However, it is not showing and portraying any notable difference. It's not portraying the difference or the value comparison which you want to see. On the right hand side, the same values have been converted into percentage, and based on this percentage values and scale which is presented on the y-axis, now we can very easily assess the true nature of the data being presented here. So that's why, like, there should be a tool and a scale which should be used to present the data, through which we can compare these values very easily. So that's very critical, that's very important. Otherwise, the very purpose of showing such kind of data in the form of graphs will not serve our objectives in this case. Then again, this is another example of a very bad presentation which is presented on the left hand side graph. In here we have just again showed the values by original scale. Then again the scale is very large as compared to the original values. The original values may be lying in between 20 to 30% or 20 to 50%. Or $20 to $50, I would say, but we are showing it in the scale of $100 on y-axis, which then shows the real values in a very small scale, and from that nature we cannot compare these values easily. So as compared to that, we have just taken a smaller scale on the y-axis, and the larger graph bars then gives us a more better presentation of what's the nature of data. So these small things do matter when you are presenting your findings in front of your audience, in front of the panel. So then again, this is another example of monthly sales data which is presented. On the left hand side, we have taken the y-axis by taking the initial scale right from the values which are included in the graph. Now this is one blunder which shouldn't be committed normally, and in this case the better option is that we should better go for the start of y-axis from the scale of 0, and then we should jump to the immediate values which are presented here from 36 to 39 to 42 in the y-axis. So it gives us a more better presentation here, as you can see. Now this was just a brief overview of how to present your data in various ways. So we discussed about the frequency distribution, ordered arrays, stem and leaf display, polygon chart, and all that stuff which is used to display the data effectively. But now we would go on with the more effective way of, I would say, of comprehending this whole scenario from practical aspect. You see, in practical sense, we discussed before that the use of quantitative business analysis did come into being because we had to transform the intangible features into tangible measurable forms, and then we had to measure them. Now, first was how to measure them, then when we measured them, then how to analyze them, how to effectively present them. So here we just discuss the example of a model and how we can take the data from that model, and then how we can use that data in SPSS and display it effectively by using the tools of SPSS. So just imagine an example, a hypothetical situation in which we just want to know that whether the human resource management practices in an organization have an impact on employees, because we have read in theory that the selection, a better selection of employees can lead to better working of employees, because it then gives us more committed employees. Likewise, we know that the training of employees, if done in regular periods of time in organization, will improve their performance, and it does improve their performance by increasing their organizational commitment as well. Likewise, the career planning, if we do career planning of employees in an organization, then it again helps the organization in driving the commitment. So if we draw this in this form, like let's say we were discussing about training. So training is one construct which is being used. Then we can say that performance appraisal is another human resource management practice, which is then again effectively used in an organization. Then career planning is another human resource management practice. Then job definition, the way how we clearly define a job of an employee, is another human resource practice which is used in an organization. And we would like to know whether these human resource practices are impacting, I would say, the employee commitment towards an organization or not. So here, let's say we want to see it from the perspective of organizational commitment. So theory says that these practices will have some kind of positive effect towards the organizational commitment of employees. And by organizational commitment we mean that commitment of an employee towards an organization. So these practices we can definitely include many other human resource practices, because there are a number of others practices in view as well. So we can take as many human resource management practices as we like. But now, what in practical aspect we would just want to see whether such kind of human resource practices have an impact on the organizational commitment of employees in an organization or not. Let's say these practices have been introduced by the organization in past 5 to 10 years, and the organization wants to see whether such kind of practices in which they have invested upon, are they giving any output as well or not. So once we have defined such a concept, then the issue is how to measure them. So we measure them by asking relevant questions from the respondents who are employees in this regard, because employees in an organization can effectively tell you whether the policy which was devised by managers is effectively being implemented on them or not. So we devise certain questions to know the level of these or the intensity of these practices in an organization. So this can again be very clearly seen. Let's see, this is a survey which we have discussed before as well, in which we have designed a questionnaire to get to know about the various practices which we have just discussed. And here in first phase we are just asking about the gender of the respondent, which can be male or female, the age of the respondent, then the name of the school where the respondent is working, and the total teaching experience of that respective respondent. Here the organization being considered is a certain school. So the human resource practices which we need to know whether they are being implemented in that specific school or not. And in this case you can see that instructions are given that they have to answer certain questions in the scale from 1 to 5. And by 1 we mean that they are strongly disagreeing with the statement, 2 means they are disagreeing with the statement, and 3 is neutral, 4 it means that they agree with the statement, and 5 means strongly agreeing with the statement in this case. So this is a 5-point scale which is being used to measure the construct of variable which we have discussed. Now the first variable which we just discussed on the screen previously was training. Now the question related to training is being asked from the respondent, who is the employee in this case. And the first question is, our school conducts extensive training programs for its employees in all aspects of quality. Now this is a statement which is trying to grasp whether extensive training is being done in schools or not in that specific school specifically, and we are basically measuring the intensity of this concept from 1 to 5, and likewise we are asking other relevant questions related to training here, like employees will normally go through training programs every year. So again, this is related to the fact that whether these programs are being done periodically or not, and we are then again rating it from the intensity of 1 to 5. Similarly, the next question is related to training needs, which are training needs that are identified through a formal performance appraisal mechanism in my school, which again is rating from 1 to 5. So likewise, we are asking different questions related to the training concept, and we are asking the employee to give us its opinion, his or her opinion, in the form of whether he or she agrees or disagrees, and also he would have to tell us the intensity of that agreement or disagreement. So once we have converted these concepts in the form of these numbers, I would say, from 1 to 5, then we can easily do the math after that. So similarly, once we have asked the 6 questions, and mind you that there can be number of questions used to measure a certain construct. It depends upon the definition of the construct, the definition of the variable which is being used, and how deep the meaning of that variable is. So based on that, the questions are then asked related to that variable. And also it depends upon the culture of that organization in which that practice is being done. So the second one here you can see is related to performance appraisal, and here we are asking around about 7 questions, and all of them are being rated from 1 to 5 from that employee. Then after performance appraisal, we are asking the questions related to job definition, and here we are asking 3 questions, like the duties of every job are clearly defined in our school, so employee has to rate this question from 1 to 5. Then the job description for each job contains all the duties performed by individual teacher. Again, he has to rate from 1 to 5. And then the third question is related to the fact that actual job duties are shaped more by the teacher than by the formal job description. So here the next then construct is related to career planning, and all the relevant 7 questions give us an overview of how this career planning is being measured through this questionnaire. Then there is another construct which is employee participation, another human resource management practice, and here we are measuring it through 3 questions. Employee participation is an important human resource management practice which is frequently used in today's organization to motivate the employees towards their work. And then another important human resource management practice is compensation, in which we are again trying to measure it through 3 questions here, and again the employee has to rate it from scale from 1 to 5. Now the another variable which was discussed was organizational commitment. In the diagram which we made, we clearly draw the concept that these human resource management practices have an impact on the organizational commitment of an employee towards this organization. which is very vital, because then it ultimately affects the overall organizational performance in this case. And here you can see here this attitude or behavior of organizational commitment is being measured on the same scale, which is 5-point scale, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And in this case here we are measuring it through 8 questions. And the first question is related that I would be very happy to spend the rest of my career in this school. So this portrays the satisfaction of the employee towards his work. And likewise, the rest of the 8 questions or 7 questions are trying to judge the same emotion of that employee towards an organization. And based on these statements, like I feel like a member of the family at the school, like I feel emotionally attached to the school, or I feel a strong sense of belonging to the school. These are all behaviors and attitudes and emotions which show the attachment of an employee towards their organization. So the employees have to rate these various terms from 1 to 5. And once we get the feedback of these constructs, then ultimately we have to then see how to measure them. So basically, coming to the original diagram which we made before, this was a concept. And again, we have, let's say, we just include the employee participation as well. And because again, this is one of the important human resource management practice which is being used. Similarly, compensation, which we have seen in the questionnaire, is another important construct which impacts organizational commitment. Basically, all of these practices are normally used in an organization to draw the motivation of employee. Now, once we have measured all these, and we have got, let's say, three questions, I think, in order to measure the employee participation. Let's say we have 6 questions in order to measure training, and then 7 questions to measure performance appraisal, and let's say likewise 3 questions for job definition, and 3 for compensation. So hypothetically, likewise we are using, let's say, 3 questions for career planning. Now, all of these questions are being rated from 1 to 5, and the employees have to rate them from 1 to 5 to give us an idea of how they see the implementation, or how they perceive how these practices are acting within an organization. Now, once we have drawn the concept on paper, and then we have determined the questions to measure them, and then we have got the feedback from employees, then it's time to convert this whole data into mathematical form, to enter it into a certain software. Now, in this case, The common software in business administration is used as SPSS, and here we will first see how SPSS is used, and we will see how to enter such kind of data in SPSS and how to work things out in SPSS to analyze such kind of data. So here in SPSS on the screen you can see that again, as we have discussed before, it's kind of an Excel sheet, and here in the bottom left corner you can see there are two views. One is the data view and the other is variable view. Now we can switch between these two anytime. Let's say I click on data view, then we will switch into another window, and then when we click on variable view we will switch to another window which would be asking for a different kind of data. Now first is that we have to define the variables which we have previously discussed in the form of a model. So here let's say in case of variable view we have to define the variables. Now coming to the first column here, it shows us the name of the variable you want to enter, and likewise the rows gives us the number, the variable number which we have to enter there. So let's just start with the name here. The first variable, let's say I want to enter is training. So the first variable is tr1. Now here 1 means the first question of the training variable. So here coming to the question, let's say like here we see is that the first question is our school conducts extensive training programs for its employees in all aspects of quality. Now we have to rate it from 1 to 5. Now every question will be defined as a separate variable in SPSS. So here when I am writing tr1, so here we can see that tr1 here can be termed as let's say in this case the first variable can be termed as the first question, and it can be termed as tr1, and here let's say we can have a look at it. Like in the second question will then be treated as tr2, and third question will be treated as tr3. So coming back to the SPSS window, we come to tr1, we have defined it. Now coming to the type here, when we click on the type we can see that it shows a term which is called numeric, and ahead of that there is a button which is showed in the form of dots. If you click on it, dialog box appears, and in which we can select various options. So here first one is numeric one. We have just clicked on that because numeric means that in this variable we will enter numerical values. Then again comma means that the values in which we have to contain commas. Likewise it goes to dot, and then scientific notations in which we have to use. Then if we want to enter a certain date, so we will define this variable type as date. And then coming to the currency values, if we are entering currencies, and coming to the string means that if we want to enter any alphabet, we want to enter any word, or this variable is defined as the words entering into this field, and this variable type will be termed as string. Now the width is the number of figures which can be entered. So basically 8-digit figure right now can be entered in this field, so that's hence the width of the field is 8. Then 2 decimal places are allowed in this field, as we are just asking the respondent to enter the value from 1 to 5, and there are no decimal places, so you will just turn this decimal place as 0, and then we will click on OK. Again, you can adjust the width as much as you like according to the value which is being entered. Right now we just have to enter 1 digit, so we can enter that, but right now I will keep it that way to 8-digit figure here. Now coming to the third column, which is the width and decimal, we have already discussed about it in the type form, in which the software has already asked us about the width and decimals. Coming to the next field, which is the label. Now label means that you can define the name of the variable here, because you must have noticed that the name presented in the first column is tr1. Now we have to write the shortest possible name here. We cannot write long names here in this first column, and in order to explain the nature of that variable, we can write the exact name of that in label. So here we write training variable 1. So it gives us more detailed description of what this variable is about. Coming to the next one is the values. You see, the values related to this factor, whenever we have to enter data in SPSS, we have to code the data. And by coding, we mean that we have to assign certain values to these questions. So clicking on the button next to none written here, so we click on the button which is showing the dots, and another dialog box opens, and in this case we can see that it is asking for values in the first part, and then in second it is asking for label. Now here this is important, that we are measuring the first question through 1 to 5 scale, and 1 here means something. I mean, 1 here we saw in previous questionnaire that 1 means strongly disagree, 2 means disagree, 3 means neutral, 4 means agree, and 5 means strongly agree. So here we just write 1 value, and the meaning of value 1 is strongly disagree, and we add this by clicking on the add button here. Now so here under this variable a term has been defined. A term like strongly disagree means 1 in SPSS. So likewise we will enter the value 2, and thus would mean disagree here, and we will add this value the same way we added the strongly disagree one. Similarly, you will add value 3, which means neutral, and we will add this here again. Similarly, value 4 will mean agree. We will add this again. And 5 means strongly agree. And we will add this here as well. So now we have defined all the relative values on which the respondent had to tick on the questionnaire, and this coding now is being fed into SPSS so that when we enter these values in SPSS, it could very much understand the implication of that. So we click on OK, and the values for training 1, or the first question of training, has been defined here. Now coming to next part is missing. Clicking on that and clicking on the button with dots, we can see here that it is asking for missing values. So what does missing value mean? Here the missing value means that what would SPSS do if in any question which has in a questionnaire the respondent has not ticked anything and has just left the question. So in that case, that value has been entered as empty in the SPSS box. So how would SPSS treat this value? So here normally this is one norm which is being carried out in business research, that if we are entering no values for any question which has not been answered by the respondent, then such a questionnaire will not be considered for analysis, and therefore such a questionnaire will be discarded. We will only use those questionnaires or those responses in which the employee or the respondent has filled all the questions. So hence here we would just enter the option of no missing values, because we will ensure that all the values have been entered here. And in this case, again, if there are certain discrete missing values, you can mention that if there is any value which is missing in any object, then what exact value you want it to be filled with, which is not advisable. So as the theories have indicated, that though there are a number of ways to treat the missing data, to properly have treatment of missing values in data analysis, but it is strongly advocated not to use missing value at all. So here we would prefer no missing values and click on OK. So here again the column here comprises of 8. It's again the dimension of the column, which is not much of our concern right now. Then coming to the next is the alignment, that whether the number entered is shown on the right hand side or left hand side of the column. You can choose whatever option you want and how you want to align the number here. Then is the last column, which is very important, is the Meyer. You must have remembered that we discussed about the various types of variables at the start of our lectures, and we discussed that there are certain types like nominal variables, interval ratio variables, and ordinal variables. So here we have to show this Meyer here, and in this case, if you click on it, you can see that the menu is showing a drop down menu. If you click on it, then a drop down menu appears, and we are given 3 options here. One is scale, the second is ordinal, and third is nominal. So in this case, the scale basically has to be defined. We already know from our previous slides that what does nominal means, and this is a categorical variable, and any such kind of data which has not got any kind of ranking is termed as nominal, like male or female, or other types in which there is no ranking involved. In case of ordinal variable, there is ranking involved in the data. And then we discussed about the interval variables and ratio variable. Here neither of them are being presented, and the third option is just presented as scale. So if you have got either interval type of variable data or ratio type, we would just term them as scale in SPSS. So here, as the values are ranging from 1 to 5, so there is certain kind of ranking involved, so we will term it as ordinal variable. So basically this is how you define your variables in this case, and how you enter these variables in SPSS. In this case, let's say I would just type in the second one for more illustrative purpose. Here for second question we write TR2. The type would remain as numeric. The width would be same, which is 8. In decimal part we don't require any decimal, so we reduce it to 0. In label we write training variable 2, and then again we can write the values here. And the other easy way is that we just click on the upper values, because we want to have the same coding or as that of first variable. So we would just right click on this value cell of the first variable, and a drop down menu appears in which we can select copy, and then we would select on the cell in which we want to get this coding copied, and we then click on the right side of the mouse, and again a drop down menu appears and we click on paste. So the same values have been pasted here, and again likewise we want to define the same coding regarding missing values, and same in terms of column. However, the measure of second variable here would be ordinal in this case. So likewise all the relevant questions here, as you can see in this questionnaire, all the 6 questions which we have seen in the questionnaire will be entered in SPSS in the same way as we have discussed before. So again the whole cell or the whole row can be copied as well. We just click on the second row button, and the whole row is selected. We click on we right click on the second row, and we can click on the copy. Now while clicking on the third row, we can right click on it again and click on paste. Now here the same values have been pasted here, but the variable name is different, and the software has given it a variable name of VAR tetra01. Now you can click on the name and you can rename this whole field according to your needs, which is TR3 here in this case. So after we have just entered the third training variable, we can click on the data view, which is shown on the left bottom side of the screen. Clicking on it, another screen like Excel appears, and here we can see that on the first 3 columns we can see the first 3 variables or the first 3 questions appearing on the heads of the various 3 columns. Now here the row 1 shows the case or the first respondent. So let's say if the first respondent has ticked on the second option while answering the first question of training, so we would just enter 2 value in training variable 1, which is the first question, which portrays that the respondent has ticked on the second option. Now going to the next question, the second question, let's say the respondent has entered or ticked the third option, so I type 3. And likewise, if the respondent has mirrored 4 option in the third question, so I enter 4. So basically now in this case, once the fields have been defined, then you have to enter the data individually based on the option under each question in which the respondent has entered or ticked certain value, and those values would be entered here under the respective variable column along with the respective row which represents that single respondent. So respondent 1, let's say, has ticked on these 3 options while answering the various questions of that questionnaire. Now again in SPSS, if we want to know that what do these codes portray, we can easily find them out by clicking on the view button in the menu bar, and here you can see that there is an option called value labels, and if you click on value labels, you can see that the coding which we did in the variable view is now being displayed in under the various columns of these variables, and it shows the meaning of those codes which we entered right before. But mind you that the SPSS, while performing the analysis, will treat all these values under these various columns as specific numbers and not as the words which you are seeing here under these column heads. It would not consider them as words. It would always consider them as numbers while doing the analysis. This viewing option is just for the convenience of the user in order to know that what does the various coding means which has been entered under these various columns. So again, this is one way to portray this thing. Then coming back to variable view, let's come to the fourth variable. We remember, if you remember, coming to the questionnaire, there was the first part in which we had to enter the demographics. Now in demographics we had asked the respondent about the gender, and we had asked the respondent to click on either male or female. So here, while coding for this in SPSS, let's go back to the SPSS screen. Here, let's say we name the variable as gender, G-E-N. Now again, the variable type is numeric. We click on the width part, which we let it remain the same, and we click on the decimals as we just have to enter the numbers, so we reduce the decimal from 2 to 0. Now coming to the label part, we will enter the actual name, which is gender here, and then coming to the values here, clicking on them, it again asks for the values which we need to enter. Presently there are none, so we're clicking on the button which is showing decimals. We are again asked to enter the value labels, and we just do the coding here. Let's say we take the value 0 for male and we add this value here. We take 1 for female and we add this option here again, and then we click on OK. So again the new values have been defined for this variable. Coming to the last part, because these missing and column and alignment remain the same. So coming to the last here, again we have to decide through the drop down menu that which type of variable we are dealing with. So here what we are seeing is that basically these kind of variables have no ranking and they have got equal footage. So this would be termed as nominal variable here. So here, this is the way how we enter various different variables in SPSS, and then we can save this whole work by clicking on this disk button, or we can go to File button in drop down menu and we click on the save, which is written here, and it would ask for the name of the file at which we need to save it. So let's say we want to save it in desktop, and we give the file name as test. So we give it the name of test, and again save as type means SPSS statistics.save. So this is the extension under which all the SPSS files are saved. So we click on the save, and this new file in SPSS has been created, in which for now we have entered 4 variables with different genres. And then once we have gone through that, we go back to the data view, which is showing all the 3 options and the values. If you want to go back to the coding part, we would just click on the view button in the menu bar, and we will click on the value labels again, and then again the same values which were showing the interpretation of the numeric values entered before. Now they are showing the numerical values of these questions. So in today's lecture we discussed about the graphical errors, and then we discussed how to model the real-time management phenomena which is occurring around us, and how to convert these intangible phenomena into tangible one, and how to draw that concept on paper, and how to visualize that concept. Likewise, how to measure these various concepts in the model which we have just drawn, and what would be the probable opinion in this case. Then how to use the questionnaire approach and tool to measure these concepts through 5-point scale, which we already discussed there. And then we went through the SPSS introduction, like what's the use of software in this, how this SPSS software is used, what's the basic usage, and how we would define the variables in SPSS. And though we have discussed the theoretical implication of various variable types, what options are available in the software when we are applying the concept here in real-time data. And once we have defined these variables, then how to code these 5-point scales which we just discussed in the questionnaire in SPSS, how we would convert that option which the employees or respondents have just selected in the form of coding in SPSS, and that was done in the form of entering of values in variable view in SPSS window. And then once we have defined our relevant variables in the variable view of SPSS window, then we learned how to enter the data in data view window in SPSS here. So likewise, again we discussed about how to view the various form of data which we have just entered under all the variables, because sometimes the worker would like to see what would the coding interpret which we have defined in the variable view part. So it's just a shortcut. However, we have already discussed that SPSS would take these values always as numbers while doing the analysis. So today we just discussed about the presentation of data, the pitfalls of presentation, and what should be avoided, and how then display this data in SPSS, because this is the real-time application in this case today, in today's era. So I hope that this is clear enough here. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.